Okay, so restarting with the mute off, or rather the mute working. So a few of you asked to do some demonstrations on using paper. Now, yes, it's predominantly a cardboard project, but basically what we have is similar kind of paper. I'm not going to use a couple of paper bags from like Home Depot and local grocery store, Roche Brothers. Same deal, they're just paper bags. Mainly because as I work on my Loveland Frogman here, there's some things I'm still working in the back here, and I do have what I built last class to redo for the back. But there's some things that are going to be a little bit awkward with cardboard. Not impossible, just depends on how you're going to go about it. Things like around the eyes, as I'm still building the eyes, but I could actually do it. Whoops, forgot that's not glued on. Maybe underneath in the softer spots. Basically things that are a little too small or have too much curvature to work with in cardboard. There's definitely ways of working with it in cardboard, because basically in using brown paper bags, it's the same thing that is just one of the layers of the cardboard. So if I were to peel this away, that's basically the same thing. Obviously, that's not as easy to work with. If you really wanted to use cardboard, or you only had cardboard at your disposal, if you damp this down, get it a little bit wet, again, that softens the glues that hold these pieces together, and you'll be able to separate the layers out more effectively. So if you wanted to only use cardboard, easy way to do it. Or you could harvest the cardboard basically for its individual pieces rather than the full corrugation. Same deal. But anyhow, I'm going to be using some paper bags, and I just want to show you a few different methods you could use the paper bags for. Let me cut a couple of pieces up here, so give me a moment. All right, so one of the first things, and I just went ahead and like dismantled the bag a bit. Be aware that, wherever the logo is and such, make sure to turn it over, use the back side. So one of the first things you can do with this, paper is going to be obviously much more easily folded. This is still pretty stiff paper, so you're going to have to deal with that, meaning that it'll kind of resist bending in just about the same ways that cardboard does. Not quite as stiff, but there you go. But one of the easiest things you can do is if you're using like paper bag paper and stuff like that, doesn't matter if there's other paper instead, it's a great way to add like texture features. And what I mean by that is smaller, like if you look at like even just yourself, any areas where you have like softer skin, your cheeks, your forehead, that's more dense skin, but softer areas like around your eyeballs, things like that. If you want to add little odd textures and such, paper is a great way to do that. And the easiest thing to do with that, cut this in half again, crumple it up. The more you crumple up paper, it's going to break down the fibers a little bit. When you unfurl that, you're going to have this built-in great texture. So we spoke a little about before, like this would be a great thing to simulate like tough hide, like leathery things, or anything with like wings or something. Pull that back tight, or I just ran this back and forth over the corner of my table, smooths it back out. You get this really great surface out of this, and this would be excellent for things like if you have softer areas, like Frogman is also going to have big big ears back here. So that'd be a great surface. Rather than it just being like a flat piece of paper, that'd be great to just have this like crinkly texture. Same thing goes, what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to crinkle this up into longer strips, and I'm going to use this kind of sort of folded, and I'm going to use this around what will be my eyes, and it'll make an excellent like just eyelid material. Yeah, I'm trying to fold this together onto myself here. So kind of sort of fold it back and forth, kind of like the old eyelids before they're all sunken and tired from life. But if you fold this around a little bit, you can see as I just wrap even just this little bit, this makes a really great eyelid material. And softer materials like that, especially if you have like gums, maybe your creature has like big snarling mouth or something. This would be great to make gums. Same thing goes. Do this, and maybe it's still a little too stiff. wet shaping. So just a bucket of water. I don't need to soak this down, but just a little bit of water gets it damp. Make sure you don't drip this all over your computer in front of you. This is going to make it that much softer, more pliable. So now I can really crinkle it up. If you keep crinkling it, keep crushing it up, just like the old, you take a piece of paper in school and keep crush it up, crush it up, crush it up until eventually it's like soft as tissue. Same deal. Now you got this like ancient tome material. So, if you just happen to be making like, I don't know, a compendium or something for your D&D book games, or just, I don't know, in general. So this now takes on this really great soft, kind of fleshiness, which, be unsettled with that as much as you will. But this could then take a really great approach and like in smaller patches, things like that, be great to fill in areas. So this could really make for a mildly unsettling, but great material. Now, one thing I do want you to note, I've got that big patch of that orange from the logo. It does start to come through a little bit. Don't know how clearly you can see it on the screen here, but it does start to come through a little bit. That's only because it's wet. When this dries, the paper kind of becomes less translucent like it is right now. You can kind of see through it. Not really, just light comes through it a little bit more easily. That won't be an issue in a moment. So there's that. And this is just a square. The other thing is like this tears easily. So you can get some really great edges out of this. Same thing goes, you don't have to treat it just as a one single piece. I'm going to come back to this and tearing this all up in a minute. But yeah, really great material. You could also, in small tufts, we talked about different ways you can treat like the corrugations. If you treat this in small tufts, and depending on how you work it, you can make some really great, like just little bits. So like if you're working with this in overlapping areas, maybe your creature has like kind of just a uneven or like gnarly surface, or this could become like hair or matted hair, something like that. This could work really well for that sort. Nice material to work with that way. Let me change up a little bit and we'll do some more talking. All right, so one of the other options we talked about a little bit before just doing the initial discussions is different ways you could maybe bring in things like origami concepts, folded paper, that sort. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm just folding back and forth, making like an accordion out of this paper. Basically, it's a paper fan. Actually, that's exactly what it is, a paper fan. So this is definitely larger than it needs to be for design-wise, but makes for a good material this way. Just straight folds. Now, would this appear in nature? Kind of, maybe. Maybe you got like a fish monster thing going. Hold it on one side, unfurl the other. Now you got something that could be a great stand-in for like fin or gills. The old gill man thing going. Creature from the Black Lagoon, that sort. Or if you need an instant cheap bow tie. But this kind of thing would work really well. And right now, all I've done is just folded it back and forth. You could then go and like clip the edges, meaning I'm just going to kind of cut this in a paper fan-like motion. So just a real basic, it's pretty much the same thing still. But this would be a great way to create like a curved fan surface. Another thing I've seen this used as a stand-in for any of you that have something that has like wings or something. This would be a great way that you could attach like to the side of the mask. And this would work as like a small representation of wings. The other thing is this is still very straightforward, as in like it's still very clean. Maybe I apply this idea of crumpling it all up and folding it in, then you get like these really kind of like gnarly tattered wings. Same thing goes with, I could then like snip at the edges. If you just change the direction, I'm just moving back and forth a little bit with my scissors, just kind of hacking at it. Obviously, I'm trying not to cut all the way up or backwards or anything like that. But what I'm basically doing is just cutting a bunch of slightly angled pieces. Maybe make a couple that are much deeper. Obviously, I'll be sweeping this up in a minute. So this would be a great way to really add those details, those features I was talking about. Let me just yank a couple out of there. So stuff to this effect, this would be a great way to create, yeah, again, one end feature, things like that. Maybe crumple up the whole thing. But the more folds and such you put into this, now and unfurl it again. I tried to reclaim a little bit of that zigzag fold that I had, if I didn't mess it up too badly. But now I'll come away with this just kind of gnarled wing-like bit. Or, some of you have like things that have like tufts of hair. This could then become like a major like crest element. Maybe this is a way to simulate like, although albeit tattered feathers, this could be a way to simulate feathers. Or leave it out straight. Make multiples of these and stack them. You make stacked layers of this, or hell, do this on top of then cardboard. You could also have different elements, especially if you have, I thought I had some examples already cut out, but exposing the corrugation behind, similar aspects here. But just adding like tatters and things and then putting a small fold or crumpling up is a great way to add additional texture with very little effort, but it adds so much. So just shredding the ends of something really helps out. And this is the same thing can go for like I said, some of you have like, you've got like a major like headpiece, but you're not sure how to cover like the neck, the back of the head, overlapping layers of this. You have overlapping layers, you give yourself more than you need. That way the next layer, I thought I had, there we go. And I'll just go ahead and snip this up real quick. Take an Edward Scissorhands approach, only far less detailed. Maybe not quite as aggressive as I just did. I'm going to crumple this up again, just so you get the sense of layering. There's layering. So if your like tufts of what will become hair are overlapping, this larger panel, you have more to actually glue to. But you start to create this layering effect. And this could even be, this doesn't have to be in big chunks. This could be in smaller pieces. But what I was saying is, those of you that have like a form that you got a great headpiece, but you're not sure how to connect the rest, stuff like this tucked under, adding to it is an excellent way to add detail, adds like a furry texture, that sort. And then it also covers your neck and such, but it's flexible enough to get your head in and out of the form. So really take note of, obviously this, if I glue this on, this would be very form fitting, but have it a little bit further out. So that way I can get the thing off my head later. Same thing goes on the back of the head. Trying to cover up the backside, keep layering. Granted, I'm basically making myself a paper mullet right now, but you get the idea. So layering materials is a huge help. But when you layer, if you're making like rows, make sure you have this extra material so that you have something to glue the next layer onto, so on and so forth. Basically, especially here in New England, anybody that's seen a shingled house, it's got cedar shake shingles. It's not like that square of shingle is all there is. There's some behind it so that the next layer goes on top of that, so on and so forth. That's how that all works. All right, that's one other method. Let me set up my kind of paper mache style one here. All right, so other things, so far we've been basically gluing everything together with like hot glue, or at least I have, that sort. Well, one thing we haven't done any of is like paper mache, or some of you were asking about like Mod Podge, things like that. It's all very similar material, basically a painted on liquid glue. So an easy way to then make like, say, a rounded form So I got a balloon here, and I've just got it tucked into a cup because that makes it a lot easier to hold on to. Be excellent for making things like what I'm going to be making. My frogman eyeballs. Balloon paper mache is definitely going to be the best way. Now, whether or not I decide to use more of like white paper, I've got like a big roll, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, of drawing paper in the back, but this paper material works very well also. Now, what I'm going to be using is simply white glue. Elmer's glue doesn't even have to be Elmer's. You get the 99-cent store version, and a little bit of water. It's a cup of water. Basically, what you want to do is, if you're doing like a paper mache, do a mix of 1-to-1. So whatever the volume of glue you add, same of water, or vice versa. It doesn't matter which. Now, if I can open this bottle, it'll be even easier. And it's a little bit old, so hopefully it's still liquid in there. Yeah, kind of. So while that is eventually dripping in, what I'm going to do is these pieces that I started tearing up and such, that's exactly what you want. You don't want to cut this. Ideally, you should tear the paper. It's going to give uneven edges. Uneven edges make for a more organic form. Unless you're trying to make simulate like scales or something like that, then scales are usually more angular. But even so, uneven torn edges make for a better torn edge. Now, cardboard, or like cardboard rather, paper has a grain. Anybody that's ever torn paper, you're probably going to know this. But tearing one direction tears pretty unevenly. Tear the other direction, usually like rotate 90 degrees. Actually, I had that backwards. That was a fairly uneven tear. So if you get a larger sheet, it's going to be pretty easy to tell. You just do a small little sample tear. Tear one way, and you're going to be able to tear all the way down pretty readily. Tear a different direction, it tends to go a little bit differently. This one seemed to actually tear pretty evenly in either direction. So, what do I know? All right, this glue just blorped out. That's awesome. I just got gloppy Elmer's glue all over my pants. Great. Anyway, doesn't need to be anything special glue. If you're using like Mod Podge, that's great. That'll work a little bit better. You'll get more of a sheen off of it. Your surface will be a little bit more shiny. Anyway, but what you do want is a good wide, stiff bristle brush. Now, these are just chip brushes. They're intended to be thrown away, but if you wash them off or keep them in the liquid, as long as it's still liquid, they'll stay dry. Then you can throw them away afterwards. But like I said, it's just a 1-to-1. So 50% water, 50% glue, or 1-to-1. I'm just stirring this up a little bit. Kind of chunky, grody. So if you decide to soak your pieces in glue first, great. Or if you just kind of get them a little bit damp so they're easier to work with by just dunking in the water first, that's fine. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. But if you are trying to paint over a balloon or something, let me turn this down a little bit. If you're trying to get paper to stick, I recommend painting a little bit of the glue mix onto the balloon first. It will help your initial pieces of paper stick down. So I'm just going to go in a randomized pattern. So this works really well, leaving it dry. If you're using tissue paper, if you're using stiffer paper like this, wet it down first. Don't have to be soaking wet, but get your bucket of water. I just dunk this a little bit, crinkle it up. You're trying to break up those fibers. The water will help. Now, as I go along, it'll be a little bit damp already. And so that as I go along and add my glue water mix, it'll blend together a little more effectively, but that means I don't have to use as much glue and water mix to get the paper to get wet enough to actually fold onto the surface. Now, the reason I'm breaking this up into such small pieces is if they were larger, they would have a hard time going over this rounded surface. So there's usually a reason to madness, or just general madness because it's fun in some ways. So yes, admittedly, these first few pieces are a little awkward and difficult to get on, but once you get underway, it'll come together a lot more readily. Now, what I'm trying to do intentionally is do kind of like a linear pattern, kind of, sort of, only because I want to kind of like simulate a surface out of it. There's really, you don't have to. It could be totally random. That would work fine. But smaller pieces will fold over a complex or a compound curve like a balloon much more easily. Now, the only downside of this is it's going to take as long as it takes to dry, meaning like you can speed this up. I was just saying earlier, you could use like a hair dryer. Be cautious using something higher powered like a heat gun, because I've got this over a balloon, and that balloon will definitely pop under too much heat. Yeah, you get the idea. Paper mache, just using smaller chunks is all. And when this dries, rather than because I'm not using like tissue paper, using this stiff paper, it will regain its original stiff properties, meaning like it'll go back to being a pretty rigid material. I've added a little bit of glue, but the inherent glue that I've kind of softened by getting it wet, the inherent glue in the paper will reestablish, and you'll have a pretty surprisingly strong domed surface. Just the trick to working with this is you have to have something like a balloon or whatever that is the size of whatever you're trying to make. So yeah, I might keep making my frog eyeball here and see how it goes. But that's pretty much, those are some really useful ways of using paper. If you're trying to go over a much larger surface, it's ideal, and this is why we're working the way we were, like this, I've got some support structures underneath. That way, if I wanted, I could then cover this whole thing in a piece of paper. I'm not, I've got cardboard that I'm working with, but if you're trying to cover a large area, don't have large, just completely open spots, because what will happen, the paper basically just flattens out on the, sorry, I was trying to get to the camera there. Basically, it flattens out. Add some supports across, basically like you're making a skeleton, and it'll help support the paper a lot more effectively. So yeah, if you're trying to make details, good material, cut it up with scissors, great. If you're trying to make more surface texture, rumble it all up and keep doing it. That makes for a really nice crinkly surface. If you want to make more compound surface, tear it up into small pieces, get it wet, glue it onto the balloon. So paper is really useful. I'm using stiffer paper that's already like utility paper, but it's a useful material. So blend it in with your cardboard form as you like.